Hi, good morning, everyone, here from southern Finland. This time, nearer to the Temple of Silence than to the Little Bear Center, although I'm in neither one right at the moment. We have been working on illusion, and we seem to be doing or looking over or trying to understand one illusion per session. We'll see if two may be possible, but I sometimes think it's better for the idea to sink in, since these are sometimes a little bit obscure. In other words, we're not used to thinking in terms of these particular illusions. It's almost easier to think in terms of glamours. So maybe driving the point home would be useful, and maybe we should stick to one. We'll see how it goes. I just want to welcome those of you who are here right now. Anne and Anne Marie and Annette and Antoinette and Ariel and Catherine, Joanne, and well, a couple of Catherines here, Catherine O'Brien and Gregory, welcome. Leslie, Lourdes, Marianne, Marissa, Martha, Natnia, uh, Risto, Suzanne, Teal, Vera, Winnie, Zenaidi. I know Tuija will be here almost any minute, I suspect. She's one of those 4 in the morning girls, you know. I don't know how she does it, but night after night, 4 in the morning, doing all that work. Well, anyway, maybe she'll be with us, hopefully. Let's just have a little alignment as we begin, remembering this world is, well, it's just rife with glamour and with the distortions and the pursuit of unworthy goals. We might say the passionate pursuit of unworthy goals. So, and all of this is part of the general distortion of what is truth. I think we may never have needed truth in the public discourse the way we need it now. We need it badly because it seems that more and more people think we're living in a post truth era, and that not truth, but they themselves are the measure of all things. As if something of this divine right of kings has slipped into the psyche of certain leaders, and the desire to be utter autocrats and to dispense with the hard-won fruits of democracy. So we have to guard very strongly against the inauthentic presumption of power, unjustified presumption of power, which is nothing more in a way than the inflation of the king of beasts, the early Leo part of us, that little personal self, as if it were the main thing. This is going on everywhere, and very few people can withstand the tests of power and use it in the right way. Interesting, DK did mention a couple of people that seem to have been able to do that. Of course, Abraham Lincoln was one, and he was considered a kind of a racial avatar at the time. And Ataturk, the founder of modern Turkey, was credited with using this very powerful Shambhala force in a disinterested manner, in a manner which was right and did not exalt his little personality instead of principles. I guess we have to deal with what we call personality and principles, and there are some people who never even thought to live according to principles, and for them, the personality is all, is everything. So let's just kind of, for just a moment, come together. We're all assuming we are at least on the periphery of this society of organized and illumined minds, which is another very fascinating name for the spiritual hierarchy of our planet. Well, certainly our minds are less organized and less illumined, but we will achieve, and we are in a position to help humanity move towards a correct organization of the mind and an increasing admission of the light, which brings the revelation of truth. Now, how we handle that revelation, we've already seen. When looking at the first two glamours, it's possible to take revelation and distort it and misapply it and render it vague and futile. These are all the illusions that we have to deal with, which prevent the higher intuitions from really becoming effective in the lower worlds. Okay. And so we try to bring through that alignment, soul, mind, and brain, and not let the astral body, which is so often out of alignment, interfere with the true impression of the higher ideas upon the brain, where it can become an effective part of the outworking of the divine plan. Okay, well, thank you. And we always work at first with our reading, and we're over here. This is our 91st Dissipation of Glamour program, and we're into our 31st reading. And we are attempting with some of these books to slowly read through them a little bit at a time. Maybe we can never really get enough of them, but they have to be, the information has to be applied if possible. We have had, we've discussed two particular illusions. I'll just name them, and then of course it's up to us to somehow have them impressed upon us. The first is illusion through the wrong perception of an idea. After all, what is an idea, and are we really receiving it? And if we are receiving it, are we perceiving it correctly or getting it all mixed up in the glamorous world of potential idealism? So the wrong perception of an idea, and he always comes down to it and says the cause. He gives us the causes of these various illusions. The cause is an untrained, unillumined mind. Okay, well, that's. I guess we can assess ourselves. I guess we all feel relatively untrained and unillumined, but if it goes too far, illusion is produced, and the cure is training in the technique of Raja Yoga. And even if we're very excited about the new yoga of synthesis, the new Agni Yoga, we do have to have a foundation in the kingly science of the soul, Raja Yoga. And we have a wonderful book to that effect, where Alice Bailey is making commentary upon 4 books of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So I suppose DK says, well, that's one of the books you better have handy with you, along with the Bhagavad Gita and the New Testament and this other little book called The Crest Jewel of Discrimination, in the Sanskrit Viveka Kudamani, the crest jewel of discrimination. And then the second illusion that we've been dealing with, illusion through wrong interpretation. And it's so easy to just bring a partial point of view to the situation and imagine your own interpretation of an idea is really somehow correct when you're bringing to that interpretation a very small mind which does not encompass the idea at all. So what's the cause of all this? The cause is an overestimation of one's mental powers. The sin par excellence of the mental type is pride, and that colors all activities in the early stages. And the cure, such a Saturnian cure, the development of a cautious spirit as we approach the various ideas, even a true idea, which may somehow via the soul and from a still higher source present itself to us. But, to approach with humility, caution, this is an amazing, let's say, thought, impression, but am I interpreting it correctly in the context of the world with which I may be familiar, and also the worlds with which I may be unfamiliar? And now we begin with the third illusion. Have you been, sort of testing yourself on the factor of illusion? It's hard to do because we have maybe a lot of confidence in how our mind works and how our understanding is delivering to our consciousness, and maybe we have not so much reason to question our conclusions, but it's better to be a little suspicious of one's own interpretation and one's own registration of ideas. It's better to be a little bit cautious about how these higher encompassing energy centers impress our consciousness. Okay, here we go. So the next one is illusion through wrong appropriation of ideas. Well, appropriation means to make something your own. You appropriate it, it belongs to you. And right there, of course, possessiveness has entered. And all the problems, says Ramakrishna, consists in the words me, and mine. Me and mine. So it's obviously a very limited point of view as to what our true identity is, and we narrow it right down to the personality. And this personality wants to grasp for itself, it wants to own things, it wants to have exclusive rights to certain things, and even in the realm of ideas. So let's see what he says about this. I think it's quite interesting. Misappropriation of an idea is based upon the drama-making faculty. Now remember how closely the fourth ray is, in general, related to the personality having four parts, particularly the etheric physical, the emotional, the lower mental, and then the summation of all of those, which we call the fourth, or the personality elemental, and it likes to stand out as being rather unique. Excuse me. I should always have some water handy, which I do not. Anyway, misappropriation of an idea based upon the drama-making faculty and the tendency of the personality to self-assertion of the little self. We don't just hold back and look at things in proportion and try to reduce the presence in our field of consciousness of that which we call the personality. For some people, that personality looms ever larger in their field of consciousness till you can hardly see anything else in its true proportion. So this is the early and lower Leo phase, and it requires the ongoing proportionalization of Libra in order to correct. We're in Libra right now. Okay, so if we assert that we're very important and we have this idea, and this is my idea, okay, these lead a man to appropriate an idea as his own, me and mine. Ownership. What in the world do we own? Any kind of grasping or power that we have over some situation or person or environment? It's all very temporary and all for use relative to the divine plan. There is no permanent ownership. Even that which we have in the causal body is eventually returned to the great storehouse of universal wisdom, and our identity changes entirely as we go along. If we think that we are forever going to look at ourselves and judge the little self that we now see as the true self, then we have a surprise awaiting for us as we disentangle our identification from this lower identification with the little personal self. Okay, so these lead a man to make his own, to appropriate an idea as his own, to credit himself, give credit with its formulation when in fact an idea is a living being, as if he thought it up. He didn't think it up. He received it from its true source, but he doesn't understand that yet. To credit himself with the formulation of this idea, and to give, therefore, and this is where the distortion comes in, undue importance to it because he regards it as his own. Now, maybe sometimes we've seen people driven by an idea. And even when that idea has not yet had its time to really appear, the timing is all off, the placement, the direction, it's all off, but because it's his idea, because it's her idea, it becomes unduly important. And so we have the glamour of overemphasis. Is a sixth ray type of glamour. We attach our emotions to emphasizing this particular idea, and we just fail to see things in proportion, and we emphasize this thing that has come to us regardless of the need of the environment. It's like having this great idea, and you go along imposing this idea because it's yours, and you don't take into consideration what the real need around you may be. Now, we're going to look at that because, some of you have read The Labors of Hercules, and you know the story of Hercules. He's always running after that very elusive golden deer, the golden hind, as it's called, and he grasps it, and this is my deer, and then he brings it back to the temple of Apollo, which is its maybe standing for his own causal body or something, and he puts it there, and he thinks it's just going to stay there because it's his, and the next thing he knows, it's out there wandering on the hills amidst all the greenery, perfectly free and not belonging to him at all, but belonging to everybody. And this idea of this is my idea. Well, I think a little wider point of view would demonstrate to us how inappropriate it is to put ownership upon any of these beings that incorporeal beings that we call ideas existing on the Buddhic plane and higher. So we have to learn, we may have been affected by the impression of an idea, but you cannot demand ownership of that which has impressed you. And we see that happening all the time. And me and my are associated with it. My interpretation, my perspective, my outlook, all of that. And it may be a very good one, except that we have tainted it by application of the word my. So, what does he do? He proceeds to build his life around his great idea and to make his aims and his objectives, driven by that idea as of major importance, whether or not the environment really needs it or the people around you really need it. When you think about it, there were a lot of these missionaries that came into native cultures, and some of them really did help the native cultures, and others were just intent on imposing their idea of Christianity or some other religion upon the native culture, whether or not that imposition was really helpful, and oftentimes it wreaked terrible havoc. I don't know if some of you have seen that movie with Robert De Niro long ago. Was it called The Mission? Something like that? The Mission? It was all about Portuguese missionaries in Brazil and their presumption of correctness and their disregard for the native culture that they encountered. It's a very heart-rending movie, but I think quite accurate in depicting what did happen. So he builds his life around this one distinguishing thought. It becomes almost like an idée fixe, and then everything that is driven by that thought becomes more important than anything else in the environment, and he expects others to recognize his ownership of the idea, his proprietorship of the idea. It's my idea. So what happens, the my part of the idea becomes even more important than the idea itself. Now, this, of course, is a huge downgrading of the impression which has come from above. He forgets that no one idea belongs to anyone, but coming as ideas do from the plane of the intuition, they are a universal, what are they? A universal gift and possession, and the property of no one mind. The rays of the sun shine upon all, and these beings who await their proper time for the upliftment of humanity, they are for the benefit of all. And ownership is just a kind of unjustified possessiveness. Now, I'm remembering this example. Excuse me here, try to get this out of the way here. Both Leibniz and Newton, independently of each other, such was communication in those days, discovered the calculus. And then, with Newton especially, I guess, they spent remaining years fighting over who had discovered that branch of mathematics called the calculus. Now, maybe some of you have, I know I found myself strangely in the university with a bunch of engineers, and I was taking calculus, and enjoying it or not enjoying it, but certainly not understanding what it was for. And it's a difficult subject for many. I found it difficult in many ways once we got into certain things. But the whole idea, too, of fighting over whose idea it really was. Now, each one of them emphasized perhaps different aspects of it, but they really were out of touch, and it really was an idea whose time had come. And they were both being brilliant, sort of third-rate, fifth-rate types. They were responsive to that impression. And you find that going on all the time. People are simultaneously impressed because, there's what do they call it? An acausal, which means not causal, an acausal connective principle, which impresses many simultaneously, each one thinking that he is unique. So, okay, so here we have a disregard for the universality, for the bounty of the higher planes as they seek to bestow the rays of wisdom and light upon all gradually. So these ideas are a universal gift and possession and the property of no one mind. So, hopefully in studying the ageless wisdom, we've gotten over that tendency to think that our particular impression is the only one and we own it. His life as a personality also becomes subordinated to his idea of an idea. That's a secondary thing, isn't it? And his ideal of an idea. In other words, let's just say, not the reality itself, but an idea of an idea, which means the thought form of an idea, and then an ideal or something worth striving for. The idea becomes the dramatic agent of his self-imposed life purpose, driving him from one extreme to another. The old saying regarding the sixth ray is kind of funny. Driving himself and irking others, annoying others, because he's so taken by a particular idea. So this leads to the illusion through misappropriation. Okay, so wrong ownership, wrong grasping, the illusion of exclusive ownership of something that is meant for everybody. Now, as we study the ageless wisdom together, I think maybe we're pretty good about this. And certainly Master DK, in presenting great thought forms to us, which are based upon his own immediate contact with ideas, never pretends that they are his. There's no ownership there at all. They come from the general reservoir of enlightenment, and any enlightened soul will realize that he or she is working in the stream of higher impression, and that he or she themselves are ideas. Really, every one of us is actually a being incorporeal and really an idea. So we have to get our mind into a more abstract, intuitive condition, divorced somewhat from the grasping personality which wants to call attention to itself. All right, I think we get the idea. Now he's giving us the causes and all that kind of thing. The cause. Now measure yourself against this, your pet ideas. We all have them, or have had them, or at least pet thought forms which represent an idea which we may have received directly or in a second-hand manner. The cause is an overestimation of the personality, an undue impress of personality reactions upon the sensed idea and upon all who attempt to contact the same idea. Maybe we don't. I remember a funny in the New Yorker magazine long ago. You know how there are, if you've ever seen the New Yorker, it's filled with these cartoons which really have a point. And here's a Indian Swami and a little Buddhist monk, and they're both glowering at each other, and really hateful and not happy to see each other at all. And a third person is introducing them and saying, "Oh, Venerable so-and-so, I'd like you to meet Swami so-and-so. He too has discovered the secret of life." So, the misappropriation of the secret of life and the resentment that anyone else should somehow possess the secret of life is very amusing. And I wonder if I still have it somewhere. I don't know. Every once in a while, I save those cartoons because one that's really in my mind actually is a man with his toolkit climbing steps out of a completely flooded basement, which obviously everything has gone wrong and there's a great flood down there, and there's no repair has been possible. And he says to himself as he's climbing out of the deluge which he has created in the basement, he says, instead I shall become a plumber of souls. I guess it didn't work out too well to become a real plumber. And, it's the attitude of the impractical person not able to solve the real on the earth problems. Okay, anyway, the cause of this problem of misappropriation, the overestimation of personality, and undue impress of personal reactions, our lunar lords, upon the sensed idea, thus distorting it, eclipsing it, muffling it, and upon all who attempt to contact the same idea. Okay, the personality is, after all, separative, and in this realm of pure reason, which is way above the personality, instead of separation, we learn about the relation of ideas to each other. And instead of a separative world of exclusively held, appropriated ideas, we have a unitive flow between real ideas. And that, of course, requires the antikarana and some understanding within the abstract mind and naturally the impress of pure reason. So at what level do we really think? Are we thinking strictly in a concrete and rather personal manner? Or can we really begin to widen our minds out into areas of thought which really, within the spiritual triad, are impersonal? And that's the question. Are we capable of impersonal thinking? Not just transpersonal thinking, but impersonal thinking where the little self becomes less and less and less of concern, and we disidentify from that little personal self more and more and more. Okay, now, the cure. We all always are interested in the cure, I'm sure. The cure is a steady attempt to decentralize the life from the personality and to center it in the soul, which is non-possessive and which is group conscious. Now, at the last conference, I gave a lecture on the 5Ds, as I called them, and I applied them, as a method of training to the different aspects of the personality. And here's the way they went. Some of you may remember the discipline of the etheric physical, the dispassion of the emotional nature, the discrimination of the lower mind, and then the decentralization of the personality. That was the fourth one. Decentralization, get off your own stage, shrink that personality image down to a point, and then eventually relinquish the point itself. There's another D above it. We might call it discernment, spiritual discernment. But in general, I think the word detachment is very important when thinking about the relationship of the soul to its instrument. So, discipline, dispassion, discrimination, decentralization, detachment, and then discernment is there operating within the realm of the soul. Okay, so I think that may be, let's see, how long is this other little section? I think I'm going to wait on that. Well, maybe I'll just do a little bit, just a little here, because this is all a general summary of the first three. I hope that, this is, excuse me, somewhat obscure area of our study. I always find it sort of difficult to remember the various illusions. I'm going to have to fix them in my mind. Master Moria says, press the bridge of your nose when you want to remember something. Agni Yoga gets that specific. If you want to fix something in your memory, press the bridge of your nose. Interesting. And maybe I'll have to do that for each one of these 7. But now he pauses for a minute and says a bit more. One point I would like to make clear at this point: ideas very seldom come into the world consciousness and into the human mind direct from intuitional levels. That would be called, in Agni Yoga terms, straight knowledge, unmediated knowledge. Usually they are filtered through various aspects of our energy system. The stage of human development today does not yet permit this. We are not yet, as a race, naturally, directly intuitive. They can come from the intuitional levels only when there is a very highly developed soul contact, a potential mind control, a trained intelligence, a purified emotional body, and a good glandular equipment. He points out how the Christ in esoteric healing, the Maya Varupa that he uses, is perfected with respect to its glandular development, and that is not insignificant. And as a result of the above requirements, so ponder upon this thought. So direct impact of ideas from the intuitional plane, and remember, it's not necessarily the entire intuitional plane, because when we look at this is the intuitional plane, but it's on the fourth level, the 4 of 4, where the real intuition begins. So, here other things are happening, and they're all important, but the intuition begins at the 4th sublevel of the 4th cosmic subplane or systemic plane we call normally the Buddhic plane. So anyway, we need a pretty good equipment here, pretty good contact and purification and training and good condition of the glands and so forth in order to get an idea directly from the intuitional levels. Most ideas, when of a very high order, are stepped down into the consciousness of a disciple by his master and are imparted to him through mental telepathy, and as a result of his sensitivity to the, quote, psychic gift waves. Those meditators in the East are generating that for us, as the Tibetan teacher calls them. So the stepping down of ideas is our normal mode of impression or acquisition. Frequently when disciples, ideas are also sensed in the interplay between disciples. Frequently when disciples meet together and thus stimulate each other's minds and centralize each other's focused attention, they can unitedly make a contact with the world of ideas which would otherwise be impossible, and bring through the newer concepts into being. And in a way, in what little effort we're making right here, that's what we are trying to do. The presence of each other, studying these matters, thinking about these matters, we may sharpen our individual ability and our group ability to access ideas. Again, another way, certain great ideas are to be found existing as a current of energy upon the mental plane, and can be and can there be contacted and forced into embodiment through the trained attention of the disciples. But note, we are speaking of the mental plane and not the intuitional plane. Now, interestingly enough, however, the term mind is not entirely removed from the realm of intuition, because the intuition is called by the Tibetan the transcendental mind. And I always think that's very interesting. It's a higher aspect of Mercury, and it's an aspect of Uranus and Jupiter. These planets convey transcendental mind. Neptune, Mercury, Jupiter, rulers of the Buddhic plane. These currents of mental energy, colored by a basic idea are placed there by the hierarchy. Interesting, just like the idea of the zodiacal signs is placed, accessible to man, on the mental levels by the hierarchy, which wants us to interpret correctly. So these currents of mental energy colored by a basic idea are placed there by the hierarchy. When thus contacted and discovered, the neophyte, that's all of us, isn't it, is apt to regard his achievement in a personal way and attribute the idea to his own wisdom and power. And that's the very thing we're trying to avoid as we study this third method of illusion, the misappropriation of an idea. You will note, therefore, the great need for right understanding of that which is contacted, as well as for right interpretation. And that brings us right back to point 1 and point 2. So we do not misperceive what an idea is, and we interpret correctly with adequate equipment. Well, that's it. I guess we got that far. And so what I'm going to do is, before I finish doing this, and so I don't be led astray or lead myself astray, I think we're still on page, 62. We've made it to page 62. We're only taking a little bit at a time. So this is the end of doggy number 91, and it's reading 31. And today is the 19th. And we have read from page 60 to 62. And the next time we get together, presumably next week, on Friday, the 26th. I'll be leaving for the United States fairly shortly, but I think I'll still be here then. And we get into the 32nd reading and the 26th day, and we should be in good shape to continue. So obviously, friends, these thoughts have to work within us. They have to percolate, they have to steep, they have to be absorbed, and we have to recognize the quality of our thought and the errors in thought which we may be making unbeknownst to ourselves. And that takes some, close, impartial examination of how we approach thought. Okay. So what have we got so far? This was the misappropriation of ideas, wrong appropriation of ideas, wrong interpretation of ideas, and the very first one was a kind of a misperception. Let's see, it's a long one here. We dealt with it. Wrong perception of an idea. But remember, nothing is more powerful in our individual life or in the life of society than an idea whose time has come. And so to study the intellectual history of humanity, which is really the study of the way the mind has appropriated approaching ideas, descending ideas, is probably to study history from the inside out rather than simply as a series of events. All right, friends, now it's time for you and your thoughts. And Vera, there you go.
Yeah, just making a little comment about that wrong appropriation of ideas. That, yeah, I absolutely agree what was there. But the the systems of discoveries, the science and industry, new forms of industries, these systems are based on that, of the recognition of putting the name there, and on that actually is the funding for those projects depends, and so it's many of those people, they do enjoy and the limelight, but there are also many who actually go with it because it's necessary, but they dissociate from that charade. So that's just, the systems are based on that individuality.
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, the head person, if there is such, references the entire team, if you will. So that, you know, DK has said about scientists, they're really much closer to the soul than the religionists, because they're far more group oriented as they work together. So I guess it just depends, you know. In the old days, Newton was very possessive of his ideas, you know, of his thoughts. And I think he had the moon in Cancer or something. He was really hanging on to things and irritated when other people came near and said, well, look, I've had that idea too. But I think gradually in the Aquarian age, my guess is going to be with the rapid spread of ideas that have shown themselves as worthy thoughts, we're going to have less of this misappropriation, and it will be recognized that different instruments, different people, different teams have been the temporary instrument for the descent of something whose time has come, and the rest of it will spread rapidly. So this exaltation of the personality, I think, will not be as strong as it has been. But right now, you're quite right. It's all, you know, we've got a lot of personality in it still. But it's going to, what shall I call it, decentralize. That's the great beauty of the Aquarian energy, decentralization. Why is it that one of the great symbols of centralization, namely the sun, in astrology is weakened in the sign Aquarius, or we call it is in detriment in the sign Aquarius, because we're going to have a lot more diversification, decentralization, and less concentration of the personal individual. So let's look for that. You know, I think it's already coming, and in our own life, we can demonstrate that too as disciples in training. Anything else, Vera?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. All right. So, your thoughts, friends. The wrong appropriation of ideas. Anybody wish to?
Friedrich has his hand.
Okay, there is Frederick. Okay, and we have two things going there: a hand, and also a because in the early stage. Good morning. Can you zoom out to be able to read the context? Okay, Frederick, maybe you would like to speak, and I'll try to.
Yes, thank you. No, it was just at some moment your Zoom was small, so we couldn't read about the context of the cause. But it's okay. It was early. Thank you for this interesting inspiration. Can we think about the origin of idea? Sometime, of course, we may have intuitional idea, and mind-related idea. But if we think about intuitional idea, maybe I think it's come from our soul, the kind of destiny that we need to make this idea becoming a living something, whatever, to make it real, and to sometimes to evangelize also, because sometimes ideas are a bit new according to the external context or the external time. So evangelization needs time, and it's also a way maybe to train our personality to how to transfer or to share this idea.
It seems,
and also,
yes, just
a small comment before, because you made an interesting study on combination of soul and personality. Maybe you remember that you mixed in one combination of soul ray, that you mixed the soul 5, the ray 5 of the soul, and the personality of ray 7.
Yes.
For how to share in a good, that means this kind of combination seems to be appropriate to share idea and to avoid this glamour issue of pollution.
Okay, it's interesting, isn't it? Actually, when using those two rays, 5 and 7 in that order, we have hit upon the rays of the planetary center London, with its 5th ray soul and its 7th ray personality and its general planetary constructive 1st ray position. Now, when you add to it the fact that London, or the United Kingdom, has a Gemini soul, the setup for the sharing of ideas in a non-possessive manner is definitely there, as long as the personality ray of the United Kingdom, Taurus, with its often acquisitive nature, does not step in. So, and these two rays, the 5 and the 7, are unusually connected with the Aquarian age, because the ray immediately connected with Aquarius, regardless of other cycles, is the 5th ray. And now Aquarius is occurring simultaneously with another 2,500-year cycle of the 7th ray, plus the fact that Uranus, whose soul ray is the 7th ray, at least as I see it, is accompanying the entire presentation of the Aquarian energy. So, and these two rays, by the way, if you look carefully at the life of Sir Francis Bacon, and maybe Roger Bacon, and maybe Le Comte de Saint-Germain, all of those will find the 5th and the 7th ray together, because he organized, what does it say? He rang the bell which called the wits together. So he was instrumental with his Sun in Aquarius, Aquarius rising, Mercury rising in Aquarius, to use the 5th ray and the 7th ray, and to avoid the abuses of sheer speculation, as we find it oftentimes upon the 3rd ray. So yes, in the Aquarian age, these two rays will be very prominent, and we as disciples in the Aryan age, coming to the end now of the 5th root race and entering a 7th ray period, we have to learn how to use these rays as well, strongly, I would say, regardless of the way we are inclined. But let's just say that as we move towards the 3rd initiation, the 5th ray will automatically come into prominence, and all of us have to learn how to use the 7th ray regardless of our tendencies, and in a manner appropriate to the times. So I think, those are important rays, and London is an important center with respect to that, and a lot of very important discoveries have come out of London. Or out of the UK. They have an ability there. But let's remember France in terms of its 5th ray soul and the scientific discovery of the soul, whenever that will come, maybe sometime in the Aquarian age. Anything else, Frederick?
No, thank you. Gratitude for your inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. Thank you. Okay. Right. It's all energy, friends. God is energy. And I was not amused exactly, partially amused and partially sad a little bit that Stephen Hawking's final book, which is now out, after his death, entitled "There Is No God," is the summation, his final statement regarding his life. Now he's going to talk mathematically about how all of the creativity that we have does not require a deity, but would happen in a way through some chance or self-organizing principle or whatever. The idea that this is amusing, I think, that a monkey dancing on a typewriter would eventually produce Shakespeare. Okay, but I thought to myself, these fifth-rate types, they have to define divinity in a different way, which is acceptable to them, because they have an abhorrence against this paternalistic view of the Father in heaven. Now, probably both approaches are true, and every ray approach to deity has its truth, whether God is a great power, or God is love, or God is light, or God is beauty, all these things, according to the ray, they're all true. And what people like ourselves who are studying a second-rate teaching can do is to help other minds become more inclusive. I'm constantly challenged by this myself, because one of my very dear friends who's coming to visit me before long, in less than a week, let's see if I survive it all, is a powerful third-ray, fifth-ray type. And all of this stuff that I study and that we study is nonsense, So it's always a great challenge to try to widen out and render more inclusive the perspective, which is good in its own right, but any ray or small combination of rays does not tell the whole story. And so, I have my work cut out before me, and I kind of relish it and just see, at least we can agree to disagree. Okay. Okay, friends. Anyone else would?
Friedrich has his hand raised.
Okay, Frederick, go ahead.
Yes, your comment brought me one additional remark is, sometimes intuitional idea can appear at the same time in different places from different person, like in US, coming from more, what can I say, mechanical or more material, in a materialistic way, and like in Tibet or in India from more spiritual way. Ideas can come from the intuition from different way.
Yeah, the instrument of interpretation or of appropriation is important in the apprehension of the idea. Maybe the same idea, but what are you bringing to it? What is any nation bringing to it? What is any group bringing to it? That will affect the manner in which the idea is impressed. Yes, good point, and thank you. Now, it looks like we have Anne here. Was that Anne? Was that you in the background? Or let's just see. Okay, I have here your statement. For each illusion, Master DK gives a different cure. So could each illusion be on a different level of the lower mental plane? Well, okay, the differentiating mind naturally will ask such a question, but what I think we should do is get the whole picture if we can, and then look at the different parts of it. the 7 illusions and see if we can answer such a question. Now, remember, we have 4 areas of the concrete mind which can be given to illusion, and let's just see how we could allocate the 7 in relation to that. In terms of allocating the 7 in relation to the higher mind, that might be a more difficult thing to do because already we have ascended out of concretion. We're still in the realm of illusion. Remember what I said, the whole cosmic physical plane is illusion from a certain perspective, but ever more refined illusions, as DK tells us. But we can look at that once we have studied everything, and I think, it's a hypothesis. It may be so. Could it be also how the petals open, the energy they give, and the difficulty of using these energies? Yes. Well, let's just put it like this. We have the knowledge petals of the egoic lotus. We have the love or social petals of the egoic lotus. And it's not until the last 3 that a concentrated effort towards true mental polarization occurs. So the phase, excuse me, pardon me, the phase at which illusion really has a grip on a person will probably not show itself until those last petals are opening up, and that is the phase of initiation. So paradoxically, it is the early initiate of the 1st and 2nd degree who is still subject to the factor of illusion. Now, I can tell from how you're asking these questions that there is a desire to get the subcategories of any factor in the right place. Let's just say the factor of analysis is strong, it seems, in you, and the factor of right location. That's all I can say. Allocating different energies to different levels. Again, it's kind of a combination of the 5th ray and the 7th ray. We may be able to do that. The one thing we don't want to do is to force a design into another design when there is not a real one-to-one correspondence, if you know what I mean. I've seen people, I have a friend, he's marvelous, he's really brilliant astrologer. When he comes up with an idea about how things might work, he tends to push them into lesser contexts so that, you ask yourself, well, does this idea really fit in this lower context, or is it being imposed? So this is another problem with illusion. I don't know if he's going to get to it, but the idea of the imposition of the idea into a context where it is not fully appropriate. And, maybe we'll come up with something there as we examine the relationship between a higher realm and a realm that might receive it. So I hope I've been somewhat clear, not entirely clear as I want it to be, but the design above may be exactly congruent with the design below. But if it is not congruent, we have to be aware of the fact that the higher cannot necessarily be impressed congruently upon the lower. And that, we'll have to take that on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, okay, now I see I've been talking to the air, but yeah, you do have that 5th ray. It's clear, Anne, from some of the questions you've asked and the way you have asked them, which, of course, the 5th ray is the ray of discrimination. It rules the law of cleavages. It allows us to study one thing at a time in very great detail, and then later to relate that study to a larger context in an accurate manner. I sometimes say to myself, if you don't want to have a mess, if you don't want to have a mixture, apply the fifth ray first before you try to see the synthesis of anything. Because with the fifth ray at work, you will have an articulated synthesis and not just a confused togetherness of various incompletely understood factors. So I say the articulated synthesis is the one we want, not just the great Neptunian mixture. And now there is a place for the all-pervading oneness of whatever shows up, and that's another type of perception. But it's very important when dealing with the factor of synthesis to have accuracy regarding all the factors which are synthesized and brought together within that synthesis. So wholeness and particulate accuracy at the same time are desirable. Okay, Anne. Well, you asked searching questions here. Let's see now. It looks like, am I correct? Frederick, are you up again? Hold on. Let me just check you here. Yeah, go ahead, Frederick.
Yes, thank you. I have an extension to your comments. It's about maybe, of course, we need to clean up and to clean this glamour pollution, but also it's part of a learning process. If we link that to, for example, to Krishnamurti, how to learn by awareness. So we can be more aware of intuitional or soul-oriented idea.
Yes. There's different, the factor of love and illumination, the second ray factors. Now, Krishnamurti, a very interesting man. My wife and I were just at his place there in what's called the Pepper Tree Retreat. And, it's kind of it's his old homestead where you can rent out a room, and be in that atmosphere. He seemed to be a very devoted second ray type at first. And, at the feet of the master was a little book written by him, and he had a relationship to Master Kutumi, so it seemed. And Leadbeater kind of fostered that relationship. But then later, some very strong first ray current came into the picture. Maybe it was because he was an applicant to the fourth initiation. Whether he ever took that initiation, I don't know. But the Arhat initiation was what he was in process of taking. That his second ray was pronounced is obvious from the fact that he was being chosen for an experiment with the Lord Maitreya, a kind of overshadowing of by the Christ Maitreya of Krishnamurti. But the experiment was also discontinued, I think, when Krishnamurti started going in a very first ray manner. And so you kind of wonder, are higher rays involved there? And did he begin to come in on the first ray, which was no longer going to be appropriate for the kind of teaching which it had been envisioned that he would carry? And yet, of course, he always had this illumination of the second ray. It was always there. Quite an amazing man, really. And you get that feeling about him, not only from his books, but when you're in the place where he lived for so many years, like, was it 70 years or so? He was there from the early 20s until the early 90s. I think he died in 1995 or something like that. Was that it? Something like that. He was there a long time. And whatever he was is very impressed upon the entire atmosphere. So anyway, look, all of us, we are partial instruments, partial, and we are never going to receive the full 360 degrees of an idea by our ray structure, by our astrology, by our experience, by the condition of our causal body. We limit automatically the manner in which an idea which impresses us can be received. So we just have to be sort of aware of our structure and look for the same idea, rounding it out, expressed through others, and maybe we'll learn something in the process as we give credit to the others. Go ahead, Frederick. Go ahead. You were going to say.
No, so it's if this kind of a learning process by awareness can be applied to young, like at primary school or kindergarten, then the young personality might be more adapted to this, to avoid this kind of glamour pollution.
Yes, a wider type of reception, and not being so entrapped by one's own rays. In other words, we do learn about our rays, and we say, there I go again. I'm doing that, am I not? And then we widen our appreciation for the other ways in which that same idea can be received. So yes, and it's coming to, and there are experiments in progressive schools along this line. So let us, let us foster these things. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now we're getting to the point where we're going to meditate. And let's see, any other thoughts or statements that you would like to, Alex? There you are. Alex, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Yeah, just 3 short questions and 1 comment. One, can you remind me how many years are left to the Piscean age? Because you said the Aquarian energies are already flowing in. So how much longer do we have to go there? 2, how long do you think it's going to be before the science proves the soul exists? 3, do you think Stephen Hawking has set that back a bit with his book and his comments? I wonder how influential you think that is.
Very influential man, but
very influential.
But there are people on the 5th ray who are making the bridge. And in the old days, which were less specialized, we have great scientists of the old days believing firmly in superior, in organizing principle of intelligence. I'm thinking about Galileo and people of that nature. So if who knows what personal factor there may be in Hawking's rejection of this possibility. Other great minds have redefined God in a way that is acceptable to them, and it adds so much when they come forward with their definition. I wish I could find again, I ran across it, Buckminster Fuller's definition of God. It just, you can't believe what he's saying, but you can understand, you believe it, but it's inspiring and arresting, and you're left with a little incredulity as you say, wow, that's a fantastic way of defining it. And it's not defined along the 2nd ray, 6th ray line at all. It's defined according to the 3rd ray and the 7th ray and the 5th ray. That's how he is defining. So I think some of these greater minds along the 5th and 3rd ray, they have to find acceptable definitions of a higher intelligence, and they have to be humble enough to recognize the presence of that higher intelligence. And of course, the next step, and it'll take a long time, is to identify as that higher intelligence. As far as the Aquarian age goes, DK, in a letter to Roberto Assagioli, said 2117 is the year you're looking for.
2117.
2117, we're just about 100 years from now, when the vernal equinox aligns with the 30th degree of Aquarius, because it all goes backwards. Now, we don't know, is that certain stars or just the generic 30 degrees? That hasn't been settled, because certain constellations are much bigger than 30 degrees, like Virgo 40 something, and some are much smaller. So it's more the field of influence within a 30 degree method of division. Anyway, the 30th degree of Aquarius comes up in 2117 at the same time that Venus is crossing the face of the sun. So that is a very interesting kind of transit. And I think, let's see, the third or the middle question you had, just refresh me on that for a minute.
Oh, it was how much more of the Aquarian, Piscean age is
Oh,
left.
okay. Well, I would say that by that time, he tells us that both the Piscean and the sixth ray influence will be pretty well out by the end of this century, with the sixth ray maybe lingering a bit longer until 2125, right in there. So we're definitely on the wane, but whenever you're on the wane, the recrudescence of the negative aspects of an energy can show themselves. And we are now watching that recrudescence, he calls it part of the last ditch fight of materialism, or he says they will fight to the last ditch. There was one other question you had in there, and it slipped my mind.
It was how.
Your impression of when the soul might be in the.
That's it. I would say we had better wait. This is a wild speculation, okay? But we had better wait until the Mercurian or Venus decanate of Aquarius in terms of real confirmation, okay? Now, I think we're going to be moving inward etherically. We're going to be more and more sensing the subtle aspects of man's structure. But I think when we get into the area of Mercury-Venus as the rulers of Aquarius, that's when we're going to have the confirmation. And of course, if you want to compare that to the fifth ray soul of France, well, both of those planets have strong fifth ray. Mercury, a partial fifth ray monad, and Venus, a fifth ray soul. I think that's when that kind of definitive identification of an inner center, scientifically approached, will be confirmed. But what do I know? This is my guess, based upon the energies. It's not going to be overnight, not yet overnight, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Yeah, thank you.
Did Alex have a comment also?
Okay,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say, as far as the birth of an idea goes, and you mentioned London, that it's interesting that I've said this before, but the idea that Brexit isn't going to happen because it can't happen, because there isn't a way for it to happen. That idea is growing and it's gaining momentum, and there's something big happening in London tomorrow, watering this idea. And I just thought, if any great minds out there want to water that idea,
okay.
I mention it.
Somehow
it's growing.
I'm very.
You have to see the seed of an idea.
Yeah.
There's the seed of an idea.
Yeah.
In all the darkness, and it's being watered, and the media is not giving it attention, but it's huge and it's big, and it's affecting. Now there's a lot of important voices, political celebrities, all kinds of organizations that are voicing it. So I'm just sort of watching, does this idea now get watered? And in fact, the headlines, yesterday in one of the papers was Theresa May asked the EU if we could have another year to think about it. The headline said, could we have another year for the transition period, which is actually supposed to take place in March. So I'm thinking, is this idea
Right.
So
let's just say that Brexit per se is a thought whose time never really arrived, as far as I can see.
Yeah.
Because, there's some kind of
we're hoping.
Integration that exists on a higher level, which this lesser idea is against. It's flying in the face of that integration, which is already pre-existing on higher levels.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the Master R, he's the regent of Europe. He's the regent of the United States. He's not suggesting separation at this late time in human evolution on the brink of the Aquarian age. This is the counterforce, obviously. Well, okay, you'll be our person in England who's going to give us the reports. Okay, thank you, Alex. Appreciate
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, friends, I think, how are we doing there? I think maybe we could begin our meditation. Does that look okay, Michael? Are we good?
That's all the hands and questions.
Okay, good. All right, good. Well, look, friends, we deal with quite deep material. Nobody has ever said that Tibetan is easy to understand or easy to apply. It just depends, of course, on what aspects of his work we're talking about. But we are dealing with both. We're dealing with the academic and we're dealing with the practical. And our main goal in all of this is to, let's just say humbly here, lessen the glamour, lessen the illusion and the chaos of Maya. If we can do something, not, we're not going to wipe these things out. That's a great hierarchical enterprise. But if we can lessen these factors, we will have done a little something. And we stay at it. We stay at it. Okay. All right. Now let's, sorry, that glass of water that I always have handy. Well, it just isn't here. Okay. So next week we'll deal with, what will it be? The wrong direction of ideas. And meanwhile, let's watch how we think. Let's watch it and see if we are falling into any of these patterns. All right. So now I kind of want to deal with a glamour today that is a kind of an early Leo glamour, but it's a dangerous one. And we see a kind of a recrudescence of it, an assertion of it again on the brink of a period when it will no longer be viable. And that's the glamour of the divine right of kings and leaders, being the sole determiner of life and death, and the presumption of absolute power because of some authority which has been awarded to the personality. We've seen some terrible things emerging here. All of the lying going on around the apparent death of this journalist, Saudi journalist, Khashoggi, however you pronounce that, I think Those who have researched, I think it's Khashoggi. So we've seen that. We've seen this dance that people are doing in order to fulfill their own selfish monetary desires. There's even the thought that payoffs may be involved to affect people's opinion. Even people in very high places who can influence an entire country may be in process of being paid off. We've seen the presumption by leaders that they have control over the life and death of their nationals and that they are not accountable to anyone but themselves. If they decide you're going to live, you'll live. If they decide you die, you die. We've seen this in the case of, well, now, what's his name? You know, the head of the Philippines. I wanted to say Marcos, but I'm dating myself by 40 years. What is that man's name? Who is the president of the Philippines? I have it on the tip of my tongue all the time. But anyway, that guy. And his war against drugs, you know, kill anybody, even, you know, if they look suspicious, kill them. We have China, of course, is much more mature in how it handles authoritarian power. So you're not going to, unless you really get behind it, you're not going to see where the abuses are. North Korea, I think, is much more blatant somehow, or less mature, or less effective in concealing the authoritarianism of the leader. Now we have this instance going on in Saudi Arabia, where the decision of a de facto leader results in the untried death of a journalist who was an irritant, part of an inner circle, and came to irritate the leader. And we have a president in the United States. All I can say, you know, excuse me for quoting the movies, all right? But long ago, there was a movie with Michael Caine, and I think with Sean Connery, I don't know. Anyway, Michael Caine was in it. Sean Connery, I think. And it was entitled The Man Who Would Be King. Think about that for a minute. The Man Who Would Be King. We have the aspiration in many quarters towards autocracy, kingship. You know, somehow Europe is holding the balance there and has learned how to deal rightly with monarchy and ceremonial monarchy and so forth. But we have the aspiration towards personal authoritarianism. Well, that's just not going to do as we stand on the border of the Aquarian age. It's just not going to do. And I think when we study together and ward off these various glamours, we can think about this glamour of authoritarianism, as I say, it's dramatic, but the divine right of kings and leaders, utter autocracy, and the presumption, wrongful presumption of absolute power by those who, well, that's what they want, you know, and the idea of democracy is far from them. So it's an abuse of the shambolic design that we call monarchy. There is a possibility of rightful monarchy from Shambhala, and we have Plato's idea of the philosopher king, and others have shared that, one who is not only in authority, but very wise at the same time. The blending of the first and second and maybe third rays in such a figure. who is put through drastic disciplining on the way toward that position. But we don't have anything near that yet. So let's just, in these days when people can be killed, murdered, eliminated by the whim of some autocrat, we have to counter that glamour. All right, so that's my little kind of explanation there. And let's get into it. So we'll just come together for a little while in the silence. And we can feel our growing synthesis as contributors to this group process where we offer ourselves as an instrument for the dissipation, understanding of, and dissipation of various glamours. Now we enter the protective stage because, let us never forget, this is work in which the unwary worker can be compromised or really afflicted. So we proceed with caution. This long-armed cross, he calls it the cross of divinity, and we pronounce the words at the different stations of the cross, visualizing the light being filled in and radiating and protecting the individual and protecting the group. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. So establish this protective cross imaginatively for yourself as an individual and for the group. Believe me, it is needed, and I speak from experience. Now, we blend the lights. We know how to do this. The light of matter, the vital light of matter, the light of the reasoning mind, and the light of the soul. So we focus and lift the light, the vital light of matter. We lift that light imaginatively to the mental plane and the power of our logic, of our thinking, of our many, many normal mental faculties blend with this vitalizing light of matter, and we imagine the blending. So we have the power of vitalized thought. And then we reach toward the soul light. First of all, we establish in our appraising consciousness the reality of soul light. So we bring down the soul light and blend it with the other two lights. We imagine the descent of this light which reveals unity. It reveals the knowledge of the soul, the love of the soul, the sacrificial will of the soul. This comes down, and now we have a triple light as one. It is vital, it is thoughtful, it is unitive, and it will be the source of our generation, of our beam, a beam of revelation and a beam of dissipation. And so the triple light is one. The triple light is one, and we will say together, that light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Now, the formula. And as we're saying the words of the formula and visualizing the process, we visualize a great searchlight which is released from the triple light. We have generated this, and it shines its light upon the astral plane. The group beam is projected upon the astral plane. This is a very living, powerful light, practical and also understanding the subtler matters that present themselves to us. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth. The inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light, we work and turn the darkness into day. So the beam is out there, or in there, however you conceive it, and it's going to work with the fogs, veils, miasmas, clouds, whatever you want to call them, that obscure and distort the truth. So concentrate on that beam for a moment, the group beam. Now we're going to invoke to strengthen the beam, the spiritual will. Do we really understand it? The will of the monad, the will of the atmic plane, we usually call spiritual will, the will of the soul, and of the different parts of the soul, the higher will, the will that would see the plan accomplished and the purpose enacted, the will. And so we use the mantra to strengthen our beam, because these are serious forces we're dealing with, and all the strength we can muster is needed. With power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. Okay, so now we're ready for this dissipative work. Our glamour is, however you want to call it, it's an extension toward megalomania of the importance of any personality, until one becomes in one's own mind the unquestioned ruler, with the divine right to do whatever one wishes and to impose upon whomever one's own wishes, intentions. This glamour of the divine right of kings and queens, of course, that's the megalomaniacal tendency, which is a huge distortion, preventing the one afflicted by it from seeing himself, herself in true proportion. And when you start a certain phrase with the words, only I can, etc., we know we're in that danger area where we see only ourselves, only our little personality inflated beyond its appropriate measure. So, the power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of the divine right of kings, the wrongful presumption of absolute power and authority. No personality should be afflicted in this way. It must not appear. The power of our united light negates the quality of this megalomaniacal glamour from affecting humanity. Proportion is needed. And self-inflation as a quality must go. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour of wrongful appropriation of autocratic power, the divine right of the leaders to lead without being questioned. With these three words of power, we will now work in the silence, and we will penetrate into the glamour and weaken it through our beam and dissipate it as much as we can. So we work for 5 minutes to do this. it is essential that the sense of leadership be accompanied by humility, which is, in the Tibetans' words, an adjusted sense of right proportion. Now, precisely it is humility that is missing from so many inflated autocratic leaders. They see only themselves, the world revolves around them, they do not have that divine Libran understanding which contributes to harmlessness, where they see their personal self proportionally related to the larger context. So this swelling, it's almost like a cancer, really is cancerous swelling of the lower ego. It just must be deflated. Decentralization must occur, and all leaders become servant leaders, servant leadership, as it is said. And we, in our own little environments, if the role of leadership in some manner comes to us, we are the servant leader. Let him who would be first among you be your servant. And the Christ has exemplified this. Okay. So we have much work to do as we bring into proportion our soul nature and personality nature, and eventually the divine spirit, so that we do not emphasize and seek to impose lower personal values upon the wholeness. Decentralization. And we will close with the sounding of the Om 3 times, assuming that the Hydra heads, as they occur on all levels, are being subdued by our work together and brought into a well-managed position as we become increasingly the soul in incarnation. Working our way down from mind to the etheric physical. We withdraw the beam. The triple light is there for use again. And slowly but surely, we make our inroads into this work of dissipating the obstacles and obscurations to the truth. We keep a sharp eye upon our own little self through our inner monitor, a sharp eye. And at the same time, we contribute our understanding and occult methods to the lifting of the obscurations which are holding many, many human consciousnesses in prison of illusion, glamour, Maya. So watch for the glamours, watch for them in your personal life, identify them, help to dissipate them. It can be done, it will be done. Tomorrow, the Soul of Nations meditation. There's a lot going on that really demands the evocation of the soul of nations. And sometimes when the soul is challenged by a big personal reaction of a nationalistic nature, it will reassert itself, and the battle will be won, according to the astrology and the rheology of the nation which might be involved. So think of your own nation and how to bring that soul, its ray, its sign, and so forth, into expression at this time. I want to thank you for attending. I think Olivia, Tuija, and I want to thank you. They're not here right now, but we just carry on, carry forward, persist. And next week also, we have the science of triangles. If you know people who would be interested in our science of triangles every 2-week webinar, let them know, and let them also know that we can provide for them some of the, all of the past programs which deal with this important section on triangles found in esoteric astrology. Okay, thank you, friends. Many blessings. Lots of love from all of us, and we'll see you soon again. Bye-bye.